All right, everybody. We are going to go over the survey today. I want to show you where it is in case you haven't found it yet, and I want to show you what we're going to do with it. I've opened the screen here so you can see me in the corner, but you can also see on the screen that this is what what our classroom looks like when you pull it up on Blackboard. Over here in our menu, our link menu, go to the course content folder, go to the big project, which is right on top. Open up big project. Okay, there we go. And then down here at the bottom, you'll see organizational completed surveys. All right. Here at the top, this baseline information survey, if you just want to see a blank survey and see what it looked like to everybody, that's it. Now you come down here, and whichever your organization is, your survey is down here. I am going to pull up the Family Promise survey because Arlette, an online student, showed up in my my face-to-face classroom, and this was hers, and we talked about it a little bit, so I'm already familiar. When you open it up, you will find that it's just a PDF form, and you can see what they filled in. All right, so what is it that you're looking for this week as you look over these surveys? First, you just want to read everything over once. You want a familiarity with what they're talking about. So I think our first surprise when we looked at Family Promise as a classroom was that they have a volunteer program that uses 5,000 volunteers. And right away you start thinking things like, gee, how do they keep track of them? Do all these people volunteer regularly? Is this just like a list of people, some of whom they've never seen in years? How do they manage these people? Anyway, lots of questions come to mind. All right, and so then you go down and you see that they've got 2 more volunteer programs that they've listed, and one are people who do things like office work, they work in the pet sanctuary, or they babysit during parent meetings. And they have maybe around 10 people that they can call on for stuff like that. And then finally, they list this third project called Volunteer Projects at Family Promise, and it seems to be kind of a catch-all. It says this is where organizations or businesses would contact us and want to do a service project at Family Promise. And sometimes they have more groups than projects. And they say annually they run 200 people or more through their organization. So let me just stop for a minute and remind you that your very first chapter that you use the template for, Chapter 2, which is Planning for Volunteers, basically talks about finding volunteer projects that to get you closer to your mission. In other words, what can we use volunteers for that would help us achieve our mission? And this, knowing that you're going to have a lot of different organizations come forward, gives an organization a perfect opportunity to think about that, rather than handling it like somebody gets a phone call from, say, Cox or APS and says, who says we have a group of people, we want to do a public service project. Can we do it? And then scrambling around to find the project. To actually think about, if we know we're going to have 200, I'm thinking maybe that's 20 groups of 10 or 10 groups of 20. I don't know. They know. And that's another question to ask. Are we talking about 20 groups of 10 or 10 groups of 20? If you know that you're going to have 10 groups of 20, then you can plan 10 things that if you could get them done, it would really help you guys. Back burner projects or anything at all. So as you're reading these things, think about what you've read in your books. All right, and you just go on through here, and I'm not going to read from all of this, but basically, this is all the information that they've been asked. All right, so let's go back up to the top and just leave it sitting here for a minute. Let me talk a little bit about how you're going to use this. Your assignment this week, which is your very first assignment, is to go through this survey with your group and look for information that seems to be missing. Now, you're not really looking for unanswered questions. For example, I can't remember if it was, it's family values. You notice they have a mission and they have a vision, but they don't make any mention of written value statement. You're not going to go back in and ask them, do you have written values? If they did, they would already be here. And you're not even necessarily going to recommend to them later when you're doing your paper that they should have values. What we're just asking for is this information to help us understand what they do have. Particularly important is the mission, because it helps you think about, are their volunteer programs actually aligned with their mission, or how closely, or could they be more closely written? But it's not this kind of blank, this values that they didn't fill in, that you're going to look for. All right, so I feel like I need to sing a song now. The song that's coming to mind is, I know you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but I'm trying to get everybody who's just kind of half listening to come back to the fore. So let's see. Oh gosh, no song is coming to mind. What song would you like me to sing? How about just this one? I think I can. That's not even a song. All right. By now, you guys have all noticed I've stopped talking about what I started to talk about. And I know that that's a little crazy, but I'm looking for anything. I just want anybody who was sort of daydreaming to come back, because what I'm about to say is really, really, really important. All right. So here's the deal. I am having you start looking at these surveys after you're already like 4 or 5 chapters into the book, right? So the part of the reason for that is you need to go back to the chapters that you've already read one at a time. Look at the writings that you created. If you recall, the template asks you to pull out what are the main points and what are the best practices. If you would pull your chapter 2 template out that says, what are the best practices? What are the main points? Ask yourself, go through the survey asking yourself, is there information in this survey that tells me if they are doing these best practices or how they are addressing these main points? If there is no information in the survey that tells you how they are addressing these main points or whether or not they're doing any of these practices, that's the question you need to ask. So for every chapter that you have read, you need to look at the main points and the best practices, and then look at the survey and see, is there enough information in here for me to know what they are doing along these lines? If not, that is a question. And I urge you to address that question as an open-ended question. So, for example, using Chapter 5 recruiting, which I wrote, you wouldn't basically want to say, do you use concentric circle recruiting? First, they might not even know that term. But second, you're just going to get a yes or no answer. Instead, what you want to say to them, if they haven't shared with you how they do their recruiting, can you please describe, that's always a great one, can you please describe how you go about recruiting volunteers? Or if you want to ask them about volunteer appreciation, which you probably haven't read about yet, it's down the road, but it would be an open-ended question that went something like this. Not, do you host appreciation events? That's yes or no. Instead, it would be, describe all of the ways that your organization does appreciate their volunteers. And that kind of describe question will get you a lot bigger answers. Now, I am thinking that this first email to them, you will take the chapters that you have already been responsible for, including Chapter 5, which I already wrote for you, but still you should have read it. And you may disagree, by the way, with my main points or what I've taken away, and you are welcome to adjust. You don't have to drop my exact thing in. In fact, if you're going to, there's probably some edits I needed to make, because I think I did that at 1 or 2 in the morning, and now when I read it, I think some of this is a little confusing. But putting that to the side, you should take those chapters, written assignments, and one at a time, you should assess whether your survey has enough information in it to answer these questions. And if not, create a question or two to put in an email to send to your organization. Somewhere down the line, you will have finished reading all of the chapters way ahead of the end of the semester. And at that point, you probably want to send another email to them or take those questions with you on your visit that's going to happen in mid-March and get answers to those questions then, so that you can finish writing up your chapters. And the next video, that's pretty much what I'm going to say here. The next video will actually cover how it is we're going to write up the chapters. But for now, I just want you to know how it is we're going to use these surveys. And the very first thing you're going to do is compare what they tell you to what you've learned in the chapters you've read so far, and see whether you have enough information to talk about how they do those things. How did they get ready? How did they did they write, what do their job descriptions look like? Do they even have them? If they don't, why not? And how do they recruit? What do they do when they bring people in? What kind of orientation or training? Those kind of things. So start there, pull out your written assignments. Remind yourself what those main points chapter by chapter are, and just do one chapter at a time. And this is the kind of thing that you would want to do together in your group meeting, and decide on what questions you need to ask to get a fuller picture so that you can answer whether or not they're doing best practices or any practices in those areas. If anybody would like me to to review your questions before you email them, and also when you get started writing your your sections for the report, if you would like me to look it over and see if you are on track, please just let me know, and I will be very happy to do that for you. Alrighty, that's 11 minutes on that. See you in the next video.